97.3 ESPN.com's Eagles insider, and from FanRag Sports NFL, their national NFL columnist, John McMullen, who joins us live on a Sports Bash Tuesday on 97.3 ESPN. Johnny Mac, what's happening, pal?
Hey, boys, how are you?
Another day in the NFL world, nonstop. It always seems to have something going on, and I want to start off hitting on this Seahawks story here and get your opinion on that. The NFL considered docking the Seahawks a second-round pick for not listing Richard Sherman on the injury report. They went from considering knocking him a second-round pick to nothing.
Yeah, the consistency of the NFL, it amazes you.
We thought about taking the franchise away from the city. Instead, we decided to do nothing. Like, it was like, wait a second here. Where was the if or the and or but?
Well, and that's been the issue with the Roger Goodell-led NFL, is the lack of consistency in these types of issues from one case to another. In this particular one, I don't have much of an issue with not penalizing the Seahawks for this particular instance, and the fact that Richard Sherman, they didn't reveal he was injured on the injury report. And we talked, Mike, you remember, we talked about the change in classifications and the taking away from probable. And I mentioned way back then this is going to be an issue because it can open up different varying things. And it's not only the Seahawks, the Pittsburgh Steelers did it in the playoffs with Le'Veon Bell, who claimed he was dealing with a groin issue. They didn't mention that. So if you take it as just an individual circumstance, I don't have an issue. I don't think it was that big of a deal. But you look at the Seahawks and their history and the claim that you sort of have this layered punishment system when the league talked about the Patriots, for instance. And the Seahawks under Pete Carroll have done, I believe, been in trouble 3 different times for breaking OTA rules and having guys in pads when you're not allowed to. So this is not the first time the Seahawks have been in trouble. It's, in essence, the 4th time, and they get nothing. So I think when you add that into the equation, it becomes, again, why you have to explain why you're not penalizing this team, and that's what the NFL gets in trouble with.
And they basically got a slap on the wrist, right? They got a warning.
Yeah, they got a warning, and there's no transparency. Nobody's going to come out and say this is the reason why they just got a warning. Nobody's going to explain it. And then when this happens down the road and somebody gets dinged something more, whether it's a draft choice or $250,000 a financial penalty, and then people are going to say, why did we get dinged and the Seahawks didn't back when Richard Sherman? They shoot themselves in the foot a lot, and it's really kind of amazing that they keep making the same kind of mistakes again and again.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right about that. You set the precedent that it's okay until the next team gets dinged for it. And if you're the NFL and you ding the next team and take a second-round pick for them after the one team got a slap on the wrist, it's just another example of
unbalanced justice.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and that's been the issue, and that's what the Patriots complained about. And that's, when they got hurt so badly from Deflategate, and on the other hand, that's why teams complain so much when they didn't really take a lot of punishment, at least what a lot of people think they should have gotten for Spygate. And it keeps going round and round and round. And the core issue, as I said, is a lack of communication. They don't explain themselves. They just say, and in this case, it was a leak to Mike Garoppolo, who's an NFL Network reporter. So it's basically a leak to your own employee saying, we're just going to give him a slap on the wrist. And there's never going to be an actual explanation for why this was the outcome. And that's the problem.
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash. What kind of market do you see, John? You mentioned the Patriots and Spygate, but there's a guy on the Patriots, Jimmy Garoppolo. What kind of market do you see for him this season? Will he be the top quarterback target that everybody shoots to get?
Yeah, he certainly will be. And I think the market goes up by the day. At this stage, I think they might get 4 first-round picks for him. I'm being facetious. I mean, right now, supposedly it's starting at that 12th overall pick that the Cleveland Browns have. And the Browns are going to be willing to give that up. And other teams, Chicago, San Francisco, certainly, they want to be in the mix. And it might even go higher than that. And, hey, it's astonishing to me. The guy has thrown 94 career passes. And while he looked very good this season when Tom Brady was suspended, remember, he didn't make it through 6 quarters. He did not make it through 6 quarters before getting hurt. And one of the issues with playing that position in the NFL is you got to be out there on Sundays. And the fact that he couldn't make it through what was essentially going to be a 4-game sort of tryout, you have to add that in the equation too. But teams are so desperate for quarterbacks in this league that they're willing to think he's Scott Mitchell, he's Rob Johnson, all the names you could think of that played very, very short periods, and you think they're the second coming. Now, maybe he is.
Maybe he's Matt Schaub.
But maybe he's Matt Castle.
But
the assumption that he's going to be a great quarterback because of osmosis and sitting next to Tom Brady, come on.
That's the case with everybody in that franchise. If you're a coach, osmosis from the Belichick, being on that staff, and then you go and you draft Tim Tebow, and it's like it hasn't worked out for any of those guys.
Yeah, and I sit and look at the skill set, and everyone's saying, these quarterbacks are not worthy. Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Kaiser, Mitch Trubisky, even Patrick Mahomes now is going to be a first-round pick. And they're not deserving of being top 10 picks. Every single one of those guys has a better skill set than Jimmy Garoppolo. Every single one of them. And to sit there and say, this guy who's thrown 94 passes in 3 seasons is significantly better than those guys, I don't see it personally.
So I think you've hinted at your answer to this, but John, if you're a team that needs a QB, do you pull the trigger on Garoppolo or do you rather draft the guy?
I'd rather draft a guy. I'd rather draft a guy and get him into my system. And it's got to be a guy with a higher ceiling. Yeah, if it's, there's talk Mahomes is going to be a top 5 pick. I think that's ludicrous. And so it depends on who it is. Would I rather have Garoppolo than him? Yes. Would I rather have Garoppolo than Deshaun Watson or Deshaun Kaiser? No. Maybe it's a push with Trubisky because he's only really played 1 season at North Carolina. So I don't think I've seen enough of him to say he's a concrete top 10 pick. So, look, I get the desperation of these teams, and I get why they are sort of lulled in by the siren song of this particular quarterback. But you have to have trust in your organization to develop young players. You can't lean on the New England Patriots to do it for you. And if I got a guy with a bigger skill set, and there's no question Watson and Kaiser have issues, and certainly mechanics are at the top of that list, but they're just better athletically. And if you don't trust your coaches and your coaching staff to get them up to speed, well, you're going to be a bad organization anyway, whether it's those guys or Garoppolo.
John McMullen with us. Good use of the phrase siren song, by the way. John, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, he's not mincing words. He says he wants to add a big-time pass rusher this offseason. Is there one out there for him to get?
Well, yeah, Myles Garrett wants to play for them, but I don't.
Myles
think
Garrett, what was he have a future What's he trying to be a future GM? Is he like parlaying himself into be like an ESPN front office insider?
Yeah, well, he's from Arlington, so it's understandable. I mean, he grew up as a Cowboys fan, and he would love to stay there, and obviously it would be a tremendous fit, but he's likely to be the number one overall pick. It's just not going to happen. And if you look at veterans, there's been talk of bringing DeMarcus Ware back, and maybe that could work in a short type of situation. Maybe he could be that for a year or two. But they've needed pass rush help for a long, long time, basically since Ware left the first time. And they need to improve that front four significantly. And obviously they're not going to be picking until the end of the first round. So it's going to be difficult for them. And I think the Ware move would make a lot of sense, at least for a team that should be a Super Bowl contender again. And maybe he's the veteran guy to get him over the top.
Yesterday, you opined on the fact that you thought the Giants should be a player for Adrian Peterson. Today, I want to follow up on that because I saw some articles in the New York papers. I believe the Daily News had that same opinion that they should sign Peterson. How likely is it that Peterson does not wear a Vikings uniform next year?
Yeah, I think it's very likely.
Wow.
It's certainly over 50%, and probably much, much higher than that. Again, his cap number as it stands today is untenable, so he'd have to rework his deal and take significantly less money from the Vikings to stick around. I think the Vikings would be willing to entertain that, but if you see this league, it's very difficult for sort of former star players to take significant pay cuts from their long-time teams. They just don't do it. They consider it sort of a slap in the face, but they are willing to take less money in other cities. That's just the nature of it. It's sort of human nature because it's a new situation. And I think that's going to be the ultimate end game to Adrian Peterson. He will be out of Minnesota, so you start to look at where are the logical landing spots. And I think the Giants are at the top of that list for a number of reasons. A, their running game was horrible last season, so they need to improve. And Adrian would certainly be a significant improvement. And B, I think they're fooling themselves and they think they're significant contenders. So I think they look at an aging, descending player and say maybe if they can get a year or two out of them, they become a real Super Bowl contender. In the last few years of Eli Manning's sort of shelf life.
Yeah, no,
I don't think it's
them adding. I guess the lineage there is to draw the line to Ezekiel Elliott, right, and see the impact that he made for that team. But are teams going to get tricked into thinking, I know Elliott was an outstanding player. I'm not taking anything away from him or his talents. But with that offensive line, you could have a mediocre running back and still have had a successful run game there.
Yeah, they had it the year before. The Cowboys still ran the football really, really well in their 4-12 season. Darren McFadden went over 1,000 yards because of that offensive line. But you see the difference.
Sure.
Between DeMarco Murray playing at an MVP-like level the year prior and Elliott last season.
Right. So do the Giants view Peterson as kind of their answer to Elliott?
Well, they might, but they shouldn't. One obviously is a rookie and is now nobody expected Elliott to be that good that early, or at least few did. And the ones that did deserve credit because he hit the ground running and was a superstar player. Peterson was once that. He was better than that. He might be – I argue – I never got to see Jim Brown. I would argue he was the best pure runner I've ever seen. But He's a descending player. He hasn't been the same since the issue, the off-the-field issues with the accused child abuse. And I always say with Adrian, I think people are enamored with him because of that running ability. He's never been much of a receiver out of the backfield. He's not good in pass protection. So he's not a well-rounded running back. He's a great runner, or he was a great runner. And I would just say buyer beware when it comes to Adrian Peterson. And certainly from the Giants' perspective, I think the Giants are caught in a bad position because I also think they have issues at the quarterback position. I just don't think Eli Manning's good enough any longer, and they're kind of fooling themselves. And I think they want to make one last run at the Super Bowl, and I see them signing a guy like AP to team with Eli Manning. I don't think it's going to end well.
Okay. Interesting there. Let's look at the other team in the division. We did Cowboys. We did Giants. Kirk Cousins, no progress in a long-term deal. They could franchise him again. There are some reports that Kyle Shanahan might try to lure him out there. Is it a slam dunk that Cousins returns to Washington?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, as long as the president of the team says it's a slam dunk, he's the one who makes the decision. And he says it is, he's going to franchise him again, Bruce Allen, if need be. So until that changes, I don't think the other teams come into the equation. And you know, Kirk Cousins is a good starting quarterback in this league. But, man, when you talk about $19.9 million a year, that's what he made last season. And if he franchised him again, that's almost $24 million. And it's going to cost on the open market $20 million maybe to get Kirk Cousins to San Francisco. Is he a lot better than Colin Kaepernick? Well, of course, but do you really want to give $20 million to Kirk Cousins? That's a tough decision.
And there's a lot, we're talking a lot of money. We talk about Kirk Cousins, Alshon Jeffrey. They just said that the number to tag the wideouts is $17.5 million. I mean, and I guess, Pete, you were talking about Pryor.
Well, and the wideouts, John, and what I remember back to is week one, sitting in Lincoln Financial Field and watching Terrell Pryor catch 3 balls for 68 yards, one of the Browns' main weapons in that game. And then you see a headline that says Browns scheduled to meet with Terrell Pryor's agent this week regarding extension. Does Terrell Pryor actually stay with the Browns in your mind, or is he moving on for sure?
I think he is going to stay with the Browns, but the Browns are in an interesting situation because there's a couple things at play there. If they franchise him, obviously he's going to be overpaid, but they kind of need to do that at this point because they've hit rock bottom and because people don't necessarily want to play there. And you've seen it. We just mentioned Myles Garrett. He's trying to do everything possible to steer himself away from Cleveland. Deshaun Watson didn't go to the Senior Bowl. A lot of people think he didn't go there because he didn't want the Browns coaching staff looking at him and wanting him. That's how bad their reputation is at this point. And when you have a player that you've sort of developed like Pryor, you almost have to do everything possible to keep him. And I think that's going to be the end game. I think they're going to do it. They'd love to work out a long-term deal, but if need be, I think they will franchise him.
All right, a lot of NFL stuff today. Of course, every day at this time, the NFL News and Notes with John McMullen. Today, John, the first day you can tag guys?
Yeah, well, I got to look that up. It's 2 weeks before March 9th, so I don't think we're there yet. February 28th, so I think it's next Monday.
Okay, all right. And then free agency opens on March the 9th is when teams can really start getting into it. And, of course, we'll have plenty on that, the draft, and more with John McMullen here. Check him out at JF McMullen on Twitter and all of his national NFL coverage at FanRag Sports NFL. All right, pal, take care.
Hey, thanks, guys.